If man is a tree, then what is woman? So if you read this somewhere, don't say it. But if you're thinking for the first time about this riddle, you could tell me your guesses. Man is a tree, then what is woman? Any comments? Your thoughts? You're a woman, right? Soil. Interesting. And what about you? Say to the microphone. Roots. Roots. Crown on the tree. Like branch? Anyone else?
Another tree.
Did you know the answer or not? That's the right answer. See, you see how even subconsciously you've been thinking of women as something other than the equal of men. If man is a tree, woman also is a tree. Right? Isn't it? Thank you. I owe you a cup of Maxim coffee. It's an amazing riddle, right? Think about. And when you learn about the answer, you go, wow, it is a deep question, right? So, for the topic on gender inequality, this is what we're going to talk about. Difference between sex and gender, very short, very easy. The nature of gender inequality in Korea. Korea's low ranking in gender indexes and causes of women's inferior status in Korea. Why is women's status in Korea so low? Because in all the international rankings I know, Korea is ranked in the bottom half. I mean, that is being generous. Bottom 1/10, bottom 1/8, to something like that, right? So that's how sort of Korea fares in terms of international ranking. So, just for fun, difference between sex and gender. The question is, you know, everyone should know this, right? And I'm sure everybody knows this. What is the difference between sex and gender? Or is this too obvious for you to just don't even want to think about like answering this? Yes. Sex is what?
What you physically are.
Okay. She's almost there. Sex refers to biological identity or physical difference of the body, that is male or female. Whereas gender concerns the psychological, social, and cultural differences between males and females. So gender is socially learned expectations and behaviors associated with each sex. So one is born male or female, but becoming a man or a woman is the result of social and cultural expectations that shape men's and women's behavior. Okay, again, don't be offended by this, because this is, as you can see, traditional notions of gender identity. And maybe you could question whether some of these traits are still true. Okay? So, feminine traits, submissive, dependent, unintelligent, and so on. And I think, at least some of you would say, that some of these are still, you know, considered acceptable feminine traits. Yes or no? Right? And in terms of masculine traits, dominant, independent, rational, assertive, and so on, right? And of course, in today's time, I think a lot of people appreciate sort of the balanced traits, both masculinity and femininity, yes or no? So, depending on the situations and depending on the context, you know, men can definitely be feminine, very caring, very sensitive. Talking about myself. All right. Comparative studies on gender inequality. This is really, I'm giving this away to you. This could easily be on your midterm exam. And this, I start with the question: what are the characteristics of societies that display more gender equality? This is a very difficult question, very open. But if you're to sort of name characteristics that define or characterize a society that is more equal in terms of gender relations, what are those characteristics? And you can think about your own society, okay? If you think your society is more equal than other societies in terms of gender relations, then what are the characteristics of your society?
Universal suffrage. Universal suffrage.
Universal suffrage. I think if this same question was raised, let's say 50 years ago or 80 years ago, that would really matters. But I think universal suffrage is now really universal. So that's why I think it's sort of not on the list, but very good answer. Anyone else? Yeah.
Equal pay.
Equal pay. I think that's close. But there is no society where there is equal pay between men and women. I mean, of course, people who do the same work, now we can expect that they are paid the same, right? But in terms of overall, men are definitely paid more than women. But we're getting closer now, yes.
I'm not sure if I'm right, but institutional mechanisms that allow correcting or discriminating
Or we could put it the other way, where in societies where you find sort of a, sort of gender equality, there is no law that is discriminatory against women. Okay? Now, if you look at, let's say, the West, if you could generalize, those societies, well, you could tell me if there is any law that discriminates against women. Yes or no? In the West, is there any law that discriminates against women? What is an example?
For instance, abortion is forbidden in some countries.
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, but then, someone could just criticize me for siding with, abortion rights advocates. But because many countries, including Korea, has anti-abortion laws, okay? Although we've been allowing so many women to have abortions, now it's really, the government is really pushing hard to make this almost impossible for Korean women to get it. Why? Record low fertility rate. When Korea was worried about, population growing too fast, although abortion has always been illegal, the government looked the other way. Okay, you can have your abortion. But now that we're in this situation where we are facing actual population decline, we're like, hey, don't do it. We're gonna push for doctors, they could lose their license, and for women who do get abortions, they'll be penalized. And so that's why some women go to China now to get abortions. Anyone else? I think abortion is a really good issue in saying something about how laws may be discriminatory against women. Yes?
more discriminated against married women with paternity
Paternity
leave.
leave.
Here, they are not in any country. So
Mm.
sometimes women have to stay because they
So that's law or work?
can't.
Mm. You know, you're talking about something that's not on the list, but it really makes sense, right? But let's see if we could summarize some of the new things that have been said later. But let's stick with what I have on the list. Anything that could show us that a society is more equal in terms of gender relations? Yes.
In some countries, such as like modern countries, you have the possibility of, like you have more places to put your children and go to work. Because, for example, in Korea, it's really difficult to find them and also very expensive. So the woman, they kind of have to take care of the children. Whereas in northern countries, they can just raise the children and go to work. And also they can have flexible working hours.
So how would you put that in
But
like
it's
one sentence? Like free access or easy access to childcare centers for women? Okay, we'll get back to that. Yes. Okay, that's something that I have on the list. Women have access to education as much as men. Okay, so that's one thing for sure. Yes.
protection of women in the political sphere.
Okay, so representation of women in politics. So there is women's voice heard in politics. Okay, so that's another one that's on the list. One more, and then I'll show you the slides. See, I want you to think rather than being so-called spoon-fed, because thinking is definitely more important than just being informed. So much more sort of activities on your part. Okay? Anyone else? All right, here we go. And I'll get back to this question in case you have other things to say. First is women's work is central to the economy. Okay, so this is sort of you have to think, you know, because how central should their work be to the economy? But again, it is based on comparative research. Okay, so that's one. Two, women have access to education. We already talked about that. Third, ideological or religious support for gender inequality is not strong. So if you look at, in the case of Korea, is this true or not? Do Korean women have access to education equally? Now we do. But up to the 1970s, it wasn't the case. When family could only send one child to college, it was always males, typically. Okay? What about third, ideological or religious support for gender inequality is strong, not strong or strong in Korea? Yes or no? It is strong. And that tradition is what? I mean, you guys are getting the answer right, but I'm worried that you guys are taking such a long time to answer it. So, in terms of ideological or ideology that perpetuates gender inequality, what is that? Yes, Confucianism. I think by the end of this course and forever, you'll always be thinking about confused Confucius. And that's okay. Fourth, men assume household responsibilities such as housework and childcare. And again, in northern European countries, for example, in Western Europe, as you saw from the other the topic that we covered in the family, they do much more household work than, let's say, men. I'm talking about men, right? Men in, I think, all of Asia. I mean, I'm making a generalization, but in comparison, that is probably true, right? So, In the case of Korea, the answer is no, right? Laws, particularly family laws, do not discriminate against women, and I think now we could say that we don't have any really laws that discriminate against women, but up to 10 years ago, I think I mentioned this before, we used to have a family law called 호주제, family household head system, in which the male, the father, was ranked first, son second, daughter third, wife fourth. And wife, again, was ranked lower than son and daughter because she does not share any blood with the husband, right? The husband is the master of the household, and if he died, the headship of the family passed on to the son, even if he was only 1 year old. Okay? But thankfully, that law is no longer with us. But we, again, used to have family laws that discriminated against women. But we also see that, although there is no law that says the custody of children should be in the hands of the husband, in many actual rulings in Korea, in the case of divorces, husbands do often get the custody of the children if they want. And that's because there's emphasis on the lineage, which is still more skewed toward men's patrilineal sort of recognition. Work is not highly segregated by sex. And what is the case in Korea? Is work not highly segregated by sex or not? Yes or no? Yes, it's highly segregated by sex, right? Although it's changing, and we're going to show the nature of this later. Seventh, women have access to full power and authority in public decision making, and this is related to representation of women in politics. Okay, so other than these seven, can you mention things that that should really make the list? And you could repeat the ones you mentioned earlier and see if it could be included onto any one of these. Yeah.
I don't know if it's included, but in India we have quotas that have to be filled, so it has to be as many women as many men that, for example, work like for the police school. So the women have to have half. They have a bigger quota.
Police academy.
Police academy.
So half. So quota.
Yeah, so that's quota. For companies too, so they want more women into the work.
That's law. Wow, 50-50.
I think that goes with five. Like, although there are no visible laws that discriminate against women, there is still conspicuous institutional inequality. For example, I think there's equal pay. For example, in the case of West, there is no law shining in light saying that, oh, there should be a disparity in wages, but it still happens. And I think it should be no laws that discriminate against women, plus there should be laws protecting women just in case of really pernicious effects of institutional equality. And I think the quota policy implementation is under the category of laws that help facilitate and protect women. Because I think England, I might be wrong, I think they introduced in Parliament the other week another quota policy about, I think, I'm not sure if it's parliament or executive positions, but at least 30% should be women. If you look at executive positions, it's probably like, I think, 10% that are actually women.
Good point. Yes.
But ironically, I think that if we have laws that protect a particular gender, it is a sign of gender inequality in society.
That's an excellent point. And when you have a quota, then it's just a sign that there is this persistence of gender inequality, and in some ways, the society is trying to correct it, right? But then over time, it does, address this deep-rooted gender inequality. Yes. Okay.
What's the heading of these 6 points?
7.
7.
So comparative research finds that these 7 elements are existent in societies that show more gender equality, because equality is not possible in any given society. And I think I mentioned this before, even in personal relationship, equality is impossible. There's always someone who has more power. Between lovers even, I think I told you before, right? Someone who loves less, who's less committed, has more power. So even with gender relations, equality is impossible from what I know. Why? It's a struggle between men and women. And men ultimately would not want to give up what they have, subconsciously and unconsciously even. And that is why what we try to do is to minimize inequality, right? I don't know if minimizing is too strong a word, but at least to reduce, right? To make our society better than what it was, and better than what it is, right? So I'm sure you could add more stuff to this list of 7 factors, and I think, as you guys were talking, I came up with sort of, I think, or someone probably mentioned this, so in terms of pay, right? So in societies where the gender equality is more pronounced, you find that the gap between women and men in terms of pay is minimal, something to that effect, right? But if you find something that could be listed or added to this list, you could write to me, okay? So gender inequality is multidimensional. Women may be more equal in some areas of life, but not in others. In almost every known society, women have had a lower status than men. And let's skip that. So this is a key point, and chances are what you will be sort of hearing about for the next 10 minutes or so could easily be in the midterm exam. It is true that Korean women lag significantly behind men in virtually every aspect of society. So, this is a question. In what ways do we find Korean women to lag behind Korean men? Like, what kinds of things do we look at? And it's not just about Korea. When you're trying to find how women in your society fare compared to men, what kinds of things do you look at? And it could overlap with the 7 things we just talked about. decision making, so that could be in where? Here, when we talk about things you can look at, they should be statistically sort of provable. Something that you could show. Like, this is what men are like, and this is what, women are like. Yes?
Job opportunities and
Job opportunities. So, whether there is a difference between hiring of men and women. Okay? So that's one. So in terms of hiring opportunities, do men and women have the same opportunities? That's one. What else? Things you could really look at with numbers. Okay?
wages.
Wages. Very good. Wage gap has always been around, but we can know better by looking at actual number, right? Like what men make on average and what women make on average. So we have two. So sort of the difference in hiring, difference in pay. What else? I don't know if that could really be compared to like what? Like how men continue to work? So I think we could come back to that a little bit later, really without coming up with a new sort of a sub-theme. Anyone else? Hours of I think it's a good one, although I don't have it on the list. Hours of work done. So that shows how women fall behind men or lag behind men. Something to think about. Yes?
Number of politicians participating.
Very good. So representation of women in politics. That's 3. What else? Am I making you guys think too much this morning?
Proportion of women in executive positions.
Very good. Proportion of women in management or executive positions. Okay? And I think we have more, but let me stop there and show you what I have. First is gender segregation in the labor force. And see, these are things you can really look at in terms of numbers. Right? So in Korea, majority of working women are concentrated in the informal subcontracting sector. So so what it is that we have a huge number and a disproportionate number of women working as part-time workers, like at restaurants, in the service industry, right? As you would agree, when you go to a restaurant, typically you're served by ajumma, right? They're all part-time workers, okay? And so nearly 2/3 of all part-time workers now are women. And what I have for you in the next 2 slides, these are from the United States in the 1980s. And I just want you to look at those and see. So we have a lot of women who work as, administrative support positions like secretaries, clerical jobs, health assessment like nurses, dietitians, physicians, assistants, right? If you visit a physician, right? You still haven't seen a physician assistant who is a male in Korea, okay? In retail sales, food service, all of these, you would agree that you find significantly more women, right? Than men. And we're talking about, if you were to put numbers to this, we're talking about like 90%, close to 100%, right? Not here, of course, but here at least. And particularly, women are overrepresented in, and there's but in comparison, or on the other hand, men comprise a large majority of physicians, professors, dentists, lawyers, accountants, scientists, and other high-paying and prestigious professions. Yes or no? Right? So here are what I wanted to show you. So this was the situation in the USA up to the 1980s. It's much changed now, but I think without really being focused on the numbers, you could see how in Korea, dental assistants, you'd say close to 100%, right, are females. Has anybody ever been treated by a male dental assistant in Korea? Secretaries, I'm surprised that it's not 100%. Every secretary that I've seen, female.
No, yeah, I did get trained by male dental assistants.
Oh.
The fact that I had to think about that is problematic, but yes.
Where was this?
At Kuocw University. I brought my front feet.
But was he a assistant or?
I thought sincerely and subconsciously, I thought he was a dentist.
No, you know how there are these students,
Oh,
right?
I
So I don't think they.
call that into question, to be honest. I'm pretty sure he was a dental assistant, but I think he could be a male intern having to be.
What do you call the doctor, like medical intern?
Maybe.
Or resident. I'm sure that's the situation, because you have all these students who are, learning the trade, right? Anyway, receptionists, cleaners, servants, registered nurses. Yeah, in Korea, increasingly there are male nurses, right? Teachers' aides, hairdressers, quite a few male hairdressers now. Bookkeepers, telephone operators. Oh yes, now even in Korea, you sometimes do get male telephone operators. Bank tellers, quite a few men now, right? Elementary school teachers, it's about the same in Korea too. It's very female oriented, or there's a lot of female school teachers who are concentrated in the elementary school. So that male teachers are very popular in elementary schools. Librarians, maids, housemen, general office clerks, cashiers, waiters, waitresses, and so on. So you can see how even in the West there is this gender segregation in terms of occupation, but what's different is one of degree, right? Not of kind. So gender segregation in terms of occupation is much stronger in Korea. Okay, in societies that are not so equal in terms of gender relations. There are some positive changes. You saw how prestigious and high-paying jobs are typically male, but it's getting better for Korea. Look at the proportion of dentists who are women. It's now, as of 2010, 1/4 of all dentists are females. That's a significant rise from just 10% in 1980. Doctors of Asian medicine, that's Hanyak, 17%, that's up from 2.4% in 1980. Pharmacists, close to 2/3 are females. Professors, still have a long way to go. Only less than 22%. And legal experts, 15% overall. Judges, 24%. Prosecutors, 20%. Lawyers, less than 12%. So again, compared to how it was 10, 20 years ago, situation is getting better. Okay? Any comments up to this point? Yeah.
Among the professors, does it also count? Does it count only the university professor or the teacher?
Well, professors would mean 2-year college and 4-year university. Other positive changes. The proportion of women who pass the examinations. In Korea, although in the judicial examination, we now have a US-style graduate school for law until recently, and we have a combined system of passing this judicial examination and going to graduate school of law. Okay? But this is really considered a sure way of success in Korea, and the proportion of women have steadily increased. So here we go. For the first time in the history of the Foreign Service examination, more women than men passed the exam in 2010. And in 2013, women comprised close to 60%, 56%, 40% of those who passed the Foreign Service examination, the higher civil service examination, and the judicial examination, respectively. Now, this is a real big question. Why isn't this a good indicator of positive changes for women in the labor market? So if you look at, how, wow, there are now 60% who passed the Foreign Service examination, 56% who passed the higher civil service examination, and 40% who passed the judicial examination. They're all positive changes. But do they really say something about how women are faring better in the labor market?
They say a lot about the changes in who passes examinations, but they don't really say anything about who are employed in positions related to those examinations.
Very good. You see, this is about women who try so hard to pass the examination, and that was it. But in terms of getting a job at Samsung, you need to go through many stages where subjective sort of evaluations, right, are calculated into who gets hired. So this is about women studying as much as men, compared to maybe in the past when women were discouraged from doing this. But now women study as much as men because they have the same goals as men, right? But with these, it's about how good you are rather than someone else passing a judgment on you in terms of evaluation. Okay? So this is a true test of how good you are without subjective interferences. Okay? So that's a good answer. All right. So here's, I'm going to get back to this. I'm sorry that I don't have this in English. This is the proportion of high school graduates who move on to 2-year and 4-year postgraduate studies. Okay? No, graduate studies. No, post-secondary education. Okay? So you can see this is male. This is female. So more women now actually go to universities, starting from 2009 or I think 2009 or 10, right? So we're gonna get back to this a little bit later, but this is what I should have shown you. This is the proportion of women who pass those exams. higher civil service examination, 43% in 2012. Foreign service, 53. Judicial, 41. 7th grade civil service examination, 39%. 9th grade civil service examination, 42.9%. Okay? So women are making progresses in areas where their capacities, if that's the only sort of a criterion with which they make the cut, then women are doing well. Okay? But as I'll show you a little bit later, here, discrimination against women in hiring. So I think I showed you too much. I should have asked you, in terms of new recruits, survey after survey has shown that only about 20% of all new recruits, and I would say definitely less than 30% of all new recruits for the last 10, 20, 30 years have comprised women. Okay? So 2008, and it's not any different. In 2010, 18.5%. And here we go. This is from 2010. Proportion of women among new recruits. Samsung, undisclosed. And if something's not disclosed, you know that it is official, right? LG, 20%. SK, 20%. Hyundai, heavy industry, not even 10%. Hyundai Motors, 17.5%, and so on. And Hanjin, that's the Korean Air. So I don't know why because I think they would have definitely had a higher proportion, right, than other companies, because they hire flight attendants, right? And in 2013, this is the latest, women made up only 22.7% of all new recruits at top 30 publicly owned corporations. And why is this disturbing? Again, we have more women going to colleges, okay? And this is quite a difference, right? 68% versus 74%. But their future, when they get out of university, is not that bright, right? Because there is this fixed discrimination. How many of you knew, maybe from reading newspapers, that you had that much less chance than men? I'm talking about women in this classroom. You saw how, on average, only about 25% of all new recruits comprised of women. Okay? You knew for the first time. Oh, you knew it. Anyone else? Should you feel sad? No, you should feel angry and demonstrate against all these companies. You know, eating shiri. One person demonstration. It's getting popular in Korea. And that 2013 survey of 575 stock-listed companies in Korea showed that women comprised only, so up to here I showed you the results of surveys on new recruits. But even more disheartening is about what percentage of women work for these top 575 stock-listed companies. And the answer is 22.4%. Isn't that crazy? Yes or no? It is crazy, isn't it? So women in this classroom have that much less chance than men. Isn't that, like, don't you want to... You gotta do something about this. The answer is, he didn't choose. Because we're talking about gender inequality, and the answer to all these problems is to fight. Okay? I'm sorry that this is not in English, but this is what matters. Proportion of women workers. Okay. As of this is the 10 largest 재벌 companies. Okay. 10 largest 재벌, right? And proportion of women. Samsung 20, let's say 25%. SK 33. But here's the killer. Hyundai Motors. How many of you, your families, own Hyundai Motor cars? I'm sure practically all of you, right? It only has less than 5% of female employees. Now, should you want to buy Hyundai Motor cars or not?
No.
Oops, we're being recorded.
I
Yeah?
think that's, I could be completely wrong, but
Yes.
I think that's direct discrimination, as in, before me, like there's 5 girls and 5 guys.
Mm.
It's not because there's 5 girls and 5 guys. I think there is just no girls attending engineering school. So I've never,
Okay.
I think it's maybe because of that. Whereas business is kind of direct. I think there
That's
are more
that's that's a good point. Postco 6%. So I think he's making a good point. Where certain 재벌, very heavy industry oriented, where you just don't have, let's say, enough female applicants to begin with. And if that's the case, then we cannot, maybe criticize these companies. But I wish I knew what the proportion of females are in engineering and in science. Okay? We just had these figures for overall, right? Gender distribution. So if anyone could find those data, I would appreciate if you could send them to me. Okay? So in engineering and in science, what is the gender ratio? Okay? So just that one. So maybe it's because of this discrimination against hiring, discrimination against women in hiring, that so discrimination against women in hiring may be one of the reasons why the rate of economic participation among women has remained relatively low over the years. And I should have asked this. What proportion of women do you think work? As you saw it already, right? But if you were to guess, what do you think the figure was or is? Again, between the age of 15 and 65, that's what they look at, right? For all women in Korea, between the age of 15 and 65, so-called economically active population, what is the proportion of women who work outside the home? Again, without knowing the actual figure, what was your guess? Yes. Yeah.
I think maybe about
30. Wow. That low. We're talking about all women between the age of 15 and 65. What proportion of these women do you think are working? Yes. Let's just say that anybody who is earning wage, okay? 45, 30. Wow. And what do you think the proportion is in the West? 55. Okay. Well, you see, proportion of men who work has always hovered above 70%. Okay? Again, we're talking about men between the age of 15 and 65. And for women, it has hovered around just 50%. And this is low in comparison to, let's say, Western countries. Okay? Because their economic participation rate is higher. Okay? And if you are to think about the reasons why so small percentage of women work, it's probably because there is this discrimination against women in hiring, right? That's the point I'm trying to make. Okay? And this is where your point comes in. We have a very interesting sort of a shape of labor participation, and we call it M shape, right? So this is what happens. Between the age of 15 and 19, only 8% work. Okay, practically they're all studying, right? And then that rises to the high, almost second highest level, 62.9% between the age of 20 and 29. So that's when you graduate from university or from high school, you start working. But then when you get married and have children, many women quit. So that falls to 56%. And when children enter schools, they return to the labor market, okay? And then so on, right? So this is a very unique sort of a labor participation pattern of Korea. Although this is from 2007, the similar pattern is found today, right? The answer is already there. Is the labor force participation rate of women positively or negatively correlated with the country's living standard? And the answer is so less money you earn, or the low-income families are more likely to have double-income couples. Okay? Does that come across as being a fact? So maybe we don't have a definitive answer to this, right? Because you have a low-income females, 67% working, but the lowest level is found in the middle class. So the answer to this is not really sort of definitive. Okay. Labor force participation rate of women in selected countries in 2011, just for fun. Afghanistan 16%, Australia 59%, Burundi 88%, Canada 62%. Let's just look at some of the economically advanced nations. Germany 54%, Japan 48%, USA 57%. So Korea's rate, I guess, is sort of not much lower than, let's say, the rates you find in other economically advanced nations. Okay. Wish I had more data for other countries, let's say in the West. Okay? Discrimination against women in hiring, in promotion, sorry. Why don't we take a 1 minute break? Okay? We had this before. 1 minute break. Stretch. Relax. I was not so fond of this because of the camera. Excuse me. 1 minute break is not to leave the classroom. It's stretching. Okay, since I didn't make this clear, if I see students leaving for whatever, I cannot have this 1 minute break. Okay? 1 minute break is really to stretch. Okay? From next time on, don't leave. guys are familiar with this expression, glass ceiling, right? Can anybody define glass ceiling? Or do I have it here?
It's like a barrier that you can't see that is preventing, hindering women from reaching a powerful position. And hence the name glass, because you can't see the barrier, so it's something like the discrimination and the barriers.
Very good. Glass ceiling is definitely barriers against. I mean, this term does not have to be applied to women only, right? It could be applied to any group that is being discriminated. Okay. So in the case of Korea, you could say that many graduates of not so prestigious universities face glass ceiling, right? Whereas in Korea, I mean, but in the West, it's typically used to refer to the situation in which women are stuck, right? And I think also visible minorities in the USA. But anyway, it's sort of invisible barriers that limit women's advancement, right? So because of this, only a small proportion of women reach management and executive levels in companies. So this is the situation. Korean women comprise less than 1% of the members of board of directors, which is much lower than the figures for Europe and the USA and China. And women comprise only about 2% of all the CEOs in Korea. So that's also much lower than the rates you find in other countries. And here we go. It's amazing how this is in English, and yet this is Korean. You gotta help me out. The rate of promotion for women in 2010. So from rank and file employee to, what is Teddy? It's not, section manager is 과장. So Teddy is Barry. See, this is a very Korean title. I think in the West you don't have that because you move from rank and file employee to section manager, right, or assistant manager. So I think we could call it assistant manager.
Someone is staff is
Okay, so proportion of women who move or who are promoted from staff to assistant manager, 23.8%. So this means 76.2% of those who make it to the assistant level are male. Okay? This is not that only 23% of women out of 100 make it to the next level. Okay? It's the proportion. Okay? Those who are promoted, among those who are promoted from assistant manager to section manager, women comprise only 15%. From, can you find each other?
It's just general section manager.
뭐라고 보자.
부장 is 차장이 deputy general manager, 부장이 부장이.
Okay. So, of those who are promoted from section manager to deputy general manager, women comprise only 9%. And of those who are promoted from deputy general manager to general manager, only 5.8% are females. And those who are promoted from general manager to executives, 8.1%. So you can see how, except for the executives, you find the sort of a downward trend, right? So this is what we could say as sort of evidence of women being discriminated. So it is not surprising that a survey in 2013 showed that 57.5% of female respondents experienced discrimination based on gender while looking for a job, and more than 80% of the respondents said that they were discriminated in promotion. Okay, so all of these not surprising. And there's a term that you probably never heard of before. How many of you have heard of glass clef? All right, so now you know glass ceiling and glass clef. And this is what glass clef is. So women who are promoted to sort of a higher level, sort of a management position, they probably face glass cliff because I don't think this is a good point. It's about this. Chances are that they are promoted to positions which are difficult to handle, okay? Or they're not given the resources and support needed for success. So the point here is that some companies promote women not because they really want to, but because of societal pressure. And when they do, they send these women to positions where their chances of success are limited, okay? Because of these, okay? So there is this sort of it's a big question as to whether this is done intentionally or, whether this is an unintentional consequence or unintended consequence. We don't know. But any thoughts about this glass cliff? Or does this make sense? Yes? Okay. The next one is discrimination against women in civil services. The idea is that when it comes to the women in civil services, they comprise a large proportion in the low-ranking grade. Like Korean civil service workers start from grade 9 to grade 1. So what you find is this. Sorry, I don't have this in English. Proportion of women who comprise 9th grade, more than half. 8th grade, again, more than half. But as you go up the rank, the proportion falls dramatically, right? And why is this discrimination against women? Because from these positions above, it's based on appointment, not based on any exam. It is, so that's why you could see that women, even in civil service, are discriminated, okay? And I think this will be like the last point I talk about. I don't know if I could give you time to have a group meeting, but I'll see what I could do. Wide income gap between male and female workers. Among the OECD countries, women receive about 85% of the income men receive, but in Korea, the average female earnings amounted to only 63.3%. Here's a little graph, okay? So it's been rising, Is the figure the same? Okay, this needs to be updated. Okay, as you can see, in 2012, 68%. Okay, but that's still significantly lower than that of the OECD average, right? The last one, I think, is this, and I'll finish after this. Underrepresentation of women in politics. So, I have all these numbers, but what is important for you to know is that as of now, women comprise this definitely needs some updating. I thought I had it. Okay. As of 2013, and this is still true, women lawmakers make up 15.7% of the total. So that's a significant improvement over the years, right? So look at from 1948, I think it was 0. But for many years, you could see how the proportion of female lawmakers were below 5%, right? So it's only from like 2004, you have the double-digit percentage of women who comprise lawmakers. Okay? So currently it's 15.97%, and it is really not that bad because world average is only 18.8%. Okay, and the question here is, I want you to think about this: is having a large number of female lawmakers a necessary condition for improving women's social status? Okay, for example, if you believe that women's status in the United States is not as high as it should be, can the blame be directed against the fact that female lawmakers in the United States make up less than 1/3 of all the lawmakers? So it's a big question, right? And you could ask also, is having female as head of state, like we do in Korea, does that mean anything for women's status? And what about in other countries, okay, like the Philippines, Bangladesh, Pakistan? Did having, again, female president bring about any meaningful change? And we'll get back to this question on Thursday. Thank you.